Terrorism is the public enemy of human society. China understands and firmly supports the government of the Philippines in its fight against terrorism. We believe that under the leadership of President Duterte, the Philippine government will surely be able to safeguard the security and the stability of the Mindanao region.
By virtue of the powers vested in me by the Constitution and by law, I had to declare martial law in the Mindanao Group of Islands for a period not exceeding 60 days, effective as of May 23, 2017. The privilege of the writ of habeas corpus is likewise suspended in the opposite area for the duration of martial law. Government may consider the covered areas of martial law in the event that members of the Maute Group and other ISIS-affiliated terrorists seek sanctuary or expand their terroristic activities in the Visayas and Mindanao.
Decided to declare martial law in the entire Mindanao, not just Marawi City.
As President, if I cannot confront them, I will resign. If I am incompetent and incapable of keeping order in this country, let me step down.
And Marcos, how yes. So, sir, considering that...
It is just an augmentation. Ordinarily, the law and order situation is addressed by the police. But once it gets out of hand, out of control, and here comes a foreign ideology that is being imposed on the people, I will not allow it. I will not allow the country to go to the dogs. As I said, the military has the primary role now of keeping the law and order situation and in all parts of the Republic of the Philippines. I may decide to expand the area to include the Visayas because it is just a walking distance actually. And because of the many islands, they can always escape there and begin another terroristic activity.
Well, actually, the group involved is not the Abu Sayyaf group, which has been involved in a lot of kidnap and ransom operations in the Sulu Sea and the Celebes Sea, and also last month in Bohol in Visayas region of the Philippines. The group we're talking today about is the Maute group, a new group that came to prominence last year, February, when it attacked Philippine military installations. And it's actually formally named as the Islamic State of Lanao or Lanao del Sur. It's a relatively obscure small group that is using the ISIS flag as a primary marketing strategy. I think the attack in Marawi was part of that propaganda ploy in order to establish themselves, establish their bona fide, and show that they're a force to reckon with. So far, the Western Military Command of the Philippines is saying that the situation by and large is under control, and they're now involved in some mopping out operations, although on the ground certain reports suggest that the situation is definitely not yet under control. Nonetheless, it seems to be critical enough or crucial enough for President Duterte to cut short his very important trip to Russia and to declare a martial law, not only in Marawi City, which is a very small part of the whole Mindanao region where Duterte comes from, but to declare a martial law all over the country. And martial law is quite a huge thing, because the only way based on the Philippine Constitution that you can declare a martial law is that there should be a state of rebellion or state of invasion. So maybe the government is suggesting here that this could be part of a broader coordinated plans by ISIS affiliate groups that the Philippine government is trying to fight against.
Dr. Kurt, what is your take of the seriousness of the situation and also the timing? Do you think it's a coincidence that this happened while Duterte was just about to start his week-long visit to Russia?
Well, I'm not an expert on Filipino affairs, but obviously it's very unfortunate that it coincided with the trip to Moscow. I mean, who knows, maybe it was deliberate.
Also, Dr. Kurt, now according to Philippine officials, the trip was expected to lead to deals in defense, security, legal assistance, tourism, the peaceful use of nuclear energy and cultural exchange. Duterte also indicated that one of the top priorities of the trip would be to acquire Russian-made precision armament, and he reiterated during the brief meeting with Putin. Let's take a listen first to what he said.
To buy, if you can grant me a soft loan, if I have the money and pay right away, because the arms that we ordered from America was cancelled, and I'm having a problem now with the ISIS. There's a rebellion.
Dr. Kurtz, how do you think the abrupt ending of the visit would affect the kind of cooperation that Duterte had in mind with regards to the arms deal with Russia?
Well, I mean, if there's an arms deal in progress, I'm not sure that cutting short the trip in and of itself will necessarily affect a possible arms deal. I mean, I think that Russia will have to be very careful anyway about signing, agreeing any very major arms deals with Philippines, because it's already supplying arms to Vietnam and others in the region. So I think it has to be a little bit careful. So I think some of the reports about, you know, possible arms deals were perhaps a little bit exaggerated.
And Mr. Haydarian, what is your take on this issue? Do you think that the deal, if Duterte's trip would not have been interrupted, would have gone ahead?
Well, I think the Philippines' pivot to the east, or its diversification policy away from the United States, is going to continue. I mean, 75% of the total armaments of the Philippines comes only from one country, the United States. And now there is a problem between those two allies, because the United States has certain legal restrictions on sending certain types of armaments to countries that may use it for activities that may lead to human rights violations. So this is essentially Duterte's war on drugs. So in light of certain disagreements, and in light of the Philippines' over-dependence on the United States, is looking for alternative suppliers, and Russia, of course, is a good candidate. Now, since last year, there have been multiple trips by Filipino top officials, including the Secretary of Defense, Delfin Lorenzana, to Russia. So the trip by Duterte was more actually symbolic, more of like breaking the ice. So the other officials, senior officials, can continue and take off where Duterte left. And it's very important to take into consideration that Putin actually made sure that he can still meet Duterte before he goes home, which shows how much Duterte and Putin have this kind of personal affinity, if not ideological affinity. Now, looking forward, I think Russia wants to sell the Philippines advanced armaments. It wants to make money. Russian economy is not doing well at all. But at the same time, on the part of the Philippines, they're looking at the terms of payment. They're looking at the configuration of Russian equipment and whether they can fit into the Philippines training and already westernized technology. And of course, there are also concerns about, whether the Philippines has enough fiscal space to buy very expensive weapons from Russia. But I think above all, Russia also has to be careful, as our guest in Britain has been saying, that Russia has been already funding countries like Vietnam essentially against China in the South China Sea. So, because of Russia's good relations with China, it has to be careful not to be seen as if it's arming China's rivals in the South China Sea.
Dr. Kurt, now, since taking office last June, Duterte has visited China twice and Russia once, but has yet to pay an official visit to its traditional allies in Europe and in the United States. What is the motivation behind his decisions? Is he realigning his country's foreign policy towards Beijing and Moscow?
I guess he doesn't have that many other options. I mean, as your previous guest, who is much more of an expert on the Philippines, said, he needs to diversify the supply of weapons. Clearly, with the United States, it's problematic because the United States usually attaches various strings to any arms deals, particularly human rights considerations and certain conditionalities. So, you know, if you're in Duterte's position, it's clearly, you know, perhaps advantageous to move towards deals with Russia, but I think also, as your other guest hinted, striking new deals and new relationships in terms of weapons procurement is not always that easy. You know, there's sort of a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of hoops that have to be jumped through, and you know, there's sort of institutional relationships between defence establishments can take time, and so you know, it may not happen that quickly, and Russia will also be quite cautious about you know, the strategic balance in the region, I think.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kurt, joining us from King's College London. And Mr. Haydarian, let me ask you a bit more about the domestic situation in the Philippines. Now, what kind of pressure is he facing in the Philippines in terms of his foreign policy? How is the public reacting to his policy trend?
Well, I've written very extensively on this issue. I think definitely there is some tension between Duterte himself and the defense establishment in the Philippines, which is more oriented towards America and has quite skeptical view, if not a suspicious view, towards China. But so far, I think Duterte has convinced the military and the broader population to give him time, to give him space, to give him the opportunity to try out a peaceful solution with China. Because the reality is that under the previous Aquino administration, when the Philippines adopted a confrontational policy towards China, it actually contributed to rising tensions. It contributed to a collapse in institutionalized diplomatic dialogue. And the reality was that the United States was also not the most reliable ally, and now under the Trump administration, US reliability continues to be a big question. So I think there is a reluctant support given to Duterte, but I think if ever there will be accidental clashes or some major developments in the South China Sea, let's say China reclaims the Scarborough Shoal, then I think a pushback against Duterte could intensify, not only among the military, but also among the broader population, because China's approval and favorability in the Filipino eye is still quite low.
Primary role now of keeping the law and order situation and in all parts of the Republic of the Philippines. I may decide to expand the area to include the Visayas because it is just a walking distance actually, and because of the many islands, they can always escape there and begin another terrorist. The law and order situation is addressed by the police. But once it gets out of hand, out of control, and here comes a foreign ideology that is being imposed on the people, I will not allow it. I will not allow the country to go to the dogs. As I said, the military has deputies in the Visayas and Mindanao.
Decided to declare martial law in the entire Mindanao, not just Marawi City.
As president, if I cannot confront them, I will resign. If I am incompetent and incapable of keeping order in this country, let me step down.
And Marcos, how so, sir, considering that
it is just an augmentation. Ordinarily,
terrorism is the public enemy of human society. China understands and firmly supports the government of the Philippines in its fight against terrorism. We believe that under the leadership of President Duterte, the Philippine government will surely be able to safeguard the security and the stability of the Mindanao region.
by virtue of the powers vested in me by the Constitution and by law, I had to declare martial law in the Mindanao Group of Islands for a period not exceeding 60 days, effective as of May 23, 2017. The privilege of the writ of habeas corpus is likewise suspended in the opposite area for the duration of martial law. Government may consider the covered areas of martial law in the event that members of the Maoti Group and other ISIS-affiliated terrorists seek sanctuary or expand their terroristic activities.